House has considered the matter of Christian persecution, freedom of religion or belief. And I call Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I welcome the Minister to his place, particularly knowing, as I do, his strong personal commitment to humanitarian aid provision over many years, not least from his time as Secretary of State for DFID, when I was privileged to serve on the DFID Select Committee, but also from our many summer recesses of volunteering when we both enjoyed the Yuma Bano projects in Rwanda and Burundi. So I know his commitment is real, and I look forward to working with him equally constructively in my role as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief. And it is very much with a constructive approach that I look at today's debate. Just to confirm, my mandate, as stated on the Foreign Office website, is threefold. One, to bring together UK efforts to promote freedom of religion or belief, or FORB. Two, to work with the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance to raise awareness of cases of individuals persecuted. And three, to support the implementation of the Bishop of Truro's recommendations, a work which supports not just Christians persecuted for their faith, but freedom of religion or belief for all. It's always with mixed sentiments that I speak at the annual Red Wednesday debate on the persecution of Christians. It's a privilege to thank the dedicated NGOs who work to support those who are suffering simply on account of what they believe. But it's mixed because year on year, global persecution is rising across faiths and beliefs, and Christians are no exception, as we've heard already. In the report published yesterday by Aid to the Church in Need, Persecuted and Forgotten, this highlights the increase in persecution and notes that Christians are the most widely persecuted faith group in the world. But it is encouraging, however, that governments across the world are increasingly recognising the importance of engaging with freedom of religion or belief as a means of promoting world stability and security. And indeed that across the world, more and more people and organisations are working together. Newly appointed envoys from different countries, ambassadors for freedom of religion or belief, academics, experts, NGOs, countries, people at the UN, the Special Rapporteur, working collaboratively together globally. May I give one example? This month, the countries in the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance are campaigning against the blasphemy laws, including the death penalty, which penalises people simply for practising their faith. And we've timed this to reinforce work led at UNGA, calling for a global moratorium on the death penalty. And it's also encouraging that the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, which I have the privilege of chairing this year, it's now grown to 42 countries. Started only formally in the spring of 2020 with a handful of countries, and yet now, almost every other month, countries are joining. Our collective voice is far louder than our individual voices alone. And so it's being increasingly recognised that religious differences are the cause of much of the violence and terror across the world today, and in turn of insecurity and poverty. Something I hope the Minister new to his post will also recognise, and not least with regard to what's happening in Nigeria today, and that we must engage with that, including on decisions regarding humanitarian aid spend. This week, Bishop Jude of Owo State in Nigeria is visiting the UK. It was the church in his diocese, St Francis Xavier, where 40 were killed on Pentecost Sunday, the youngest 2 years old. He described for us yesterday the scene of carnage which met him as he entered his church. Tragically, however, that was not an isolated incident. Right across so many states in Nigeria today, Fulani jihadists, Islamic extremists, are kidnapping, ransoming and killing clergy, abducting school students, forcibly converting, that's raping and marrying Christian girls, seizing land, obliterating villages, killing whole communities and then renaming their land, dispossessing thousands who flee to live in informal IDP camps. And these aren't camps with UN support, these are often camps supported by NGOs, and where hunger, thirst, lack of shelter and fear are rife. I heard just this week of how 2 teenage boys who were hungry risked leaving the IDP camp to try to fish for food. Their bodies were returned. Their heads had been split open like melons with machetes. Time precludes more accounts of the multiple atrocities currently happening in Nigeria today. But if I may, I will send to the Minister documentation that I've received for this debate, including from Dr. Richard Akabi of the University at Lagos, from ACN, from Baroness Cox, from Open Doors, and from the Director of Advocacy at Open Doors, Dave Landrum, who visited just 2 years ago and tells me atrocities are not just happening daily, they're happening hourly. And this cannot just be explained through climate change and a fight over grazing land. As Dr. Landrum told me, he says it's happening now in the forests and in the jungles. And the kidnapping of the Chibok schoolgirls in 2014 had nothing to do with a fight over land, nor the thousands of school children like Leah Sharibu since abducted, ransomed or disappeared. As Bishop Jude told us, the massacre at St. Francis Catholic Church, OO, has nothing to do with climate change. We need to recognise, and I implore the Minister to do so today, that religious differences have everything to do with this violence and indeed are the key root cause to the atrocities occurring in so many states across Nigeria today. Aid to the Church in Need state. In Africa, the state of Christians has worsened in all countries reviewed amid a sharp rise in genocidal violence from militant non-state actors, including jihadists. I would be grateful if the Minister would meet with me and others to discuss how we can address this. Addressing religious differences now needs to be a priority in our decision-making regarding this. ODA bilateral spend in Nigeria in 2021-22 was over £100 million. Other governments are recognising the importance of addressing promoting religious cohesion and putting real funds behind their commitment. And that's why I say I want to be constructive in making some suggestions. The Netherlands, for example, is funding projects in Kaduna and Plateau States, Nigeria, whereby young Christians and Muslims have worked collaboratively on projects, such as one to get more electricity into their communities. And it has worked. Not only has this joint working promoted understanding and cohesion, but now the women and young people who for their livelihoods use sewing machines to produce clothes can now work longer hours because of that electricity that's available. Just one of many such projects where joint working across religious communities can build trust. How can the UK engage in this way? And it is vital. Nigeria is a huge country, over 200 million. And because of the violence there, many young people are feeling increasingly disengaged and futureless. Time and time again, I've warned of how, if the UK, whose voice still, Bishop Jude tells me, commands huge respect there, indeed he said the most of any other country internationally, if we do not engage, he says, and others have said, then millions of young people who feel they have no future in Nigeria will seek to travel here. And the devastating impact of that flood of potentially millions of migrants will overwhelm the countries in between, such as Niger, a point that cannot be overstated, indeed was mentioned to me strongly by a Member of Parliament from Niger when I met him here last month. Providing better understanding between faith and belief groups, between young people in a young country, which Nigeria is, I believe, just as critical as providing education for them. And projects similar to the one I described involving young people and engaging them on the issue of FORB have been funded in other countries in many parts of the world. There are FORB-related projects in Somalia, Philippines, South Sudan, Kenya and Mali. One project I heard of, which I understand is proving successful, is in the Central African Republic, bringing youth and religious leaders together to reduce hate speech in the digital sphere. Will the Minister discuss with me how the UK can play its part in supporting similar projects? Addressing the importance of freedom of religion or belief is vital today if we are to maintain our leadership role in tackling poverty and security across the world. And we cannot start too young. May I speak of another project which the Alliance I chair is taking forward from the London Ministerial. And this is to create the production of materials for primary schools to help teachers educate the very youngest of children that it is just as important not to discriminate against someone on account of their beliefs as it is, for example, if they are disabled. I'm delighted that one of the schools piloting this project is in my own constituency, a project recently welcomed with interest by our own schools minister. Our Alliance's aim is, we hope, to roll out these teaching materials, once piloted, across the 42 countries in our alliance, an idea initiated by one of the Alliance Vice-Chairs, Ambassador Robert Rehak of the Czech Republic. We cannot start too young to help people understand across the world how critical it is to live peaceably with others of different beliefs, particularly as there's so much friction leading to violence in the world today. If the Minister is still unpersuaded by reports from NGOs that the root cause of the current horrendous conflict in Nigeria is not climate change, but attacks by religious extremists intent on genocidal destruction, would he perhaps support an impartial evaluation of what's currently going on in Nigeria and press for a UN Commission of Inquiry on Nigeria? And will the Minister look at how addressing such freedom of religion or belief issues can be included more strongly in the wording of the revised integrated review announced by the Chancellor today? The current integrated review commits as a priority action to promote freedom of religion or belief overseas, taking forward the recommendations of the Bishop of Truro's 2019 independent review and raising awareness of cases of particular concern, including through collaboration with the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance. In 2022, we will host an international ministerial conference to agree steps to advance FORB for all. Now, the ministerial conference was, of course, held in London in July. No less than 88 countries sent official delegates, with over 1,000 delegates attending from over 100 countries in all. And the Truro Review is, of course, a manifesto commitment, and there are still outstanding elements to be fulfilled. And I hope that the Minister will concur with me, and indeed it's in accordance with the Prime Minister's determination to address outstanding manifesto commitments, that work on the Truro Review should be completed. As I say, this is promoting not just freedom of religion for Christians, but freedom of religion or belief for all. As required under Truro, an independent review of progress of the Truro work was carried out this year, commissioned by the FCDO. And that work was led, that independent review was led by 3 freedom of religion or belief experts, including the current UN Special Rapporteur on FORB, and it was published in April. Its recommendations were fully accepted by the then Foreign Secretary in a written statement, and it highlighted that there is outstanding Truro work to be done. It included as a key recommendation the production of a comprehensive operational action plan to aid, and I quote, a more integrated policy approach to mainstreaming FORB in the FCDO and, quote, informing multilateral and bilateral level engagement. This is much needed. The experts highlighted that work on FORB in the FCDO would benefit from, I quote, more connectivity amongst those in the FCDO pursuing FORB activities. I agree. It is now well over 6 months since that expert's review was completed, and action on the comprehensive operational action plan needs to be taken forward. Lack of joined-up working within the FCDO and FORB means that resources are not being used as efficiently as they could be. That needs to change. I'd welcome an opportunity to discuss this with the Minister, but this is not to disparage the strong commitment to FORB of our parliamentary colleague, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon. It's about making the best use of FCDO resources in support of our mutual roles and indeed in support of the Minister here today. I'm closing shortly, Madam Chairman, you'll be pleased to hear. We also need to be bolder and better at raising awareness of specific cases of concern. At the end of the day, the whole point of advancing freedom of religion or belief is to make lives better. And where individuals are suffering and there is an opportunity for us to do so, we should, in my view, be braver. And this, of course, complies with my own mandate, which I touched on at the start of my speech. We should be braver in raising particular cases of concern. And so may I close in highlighting too, in this very debate 2 years ago, I highlighted the case of Mara Shabazz. Will the Minister now look at how the UK can give safe haven to that poor girl who 2 years on still remains in hiding in fear of oppressors, living in one room with a sink? And will the Minister meet with me not only to discuss her case, but the case of Sawan Masi, also from Pakistan, a case raised previously by the Honourable Member for Strangford, a man who also lives in hiding with his family, fearing death from a mob, having been acquitted by courts following being sentenced to death for blasphemy. I look forward to the Minister's response today.
I plan to move to front bench wind-up